It is hot out today and the humidity is high, mid-90s, and so it's a really good idea to try something new in the kitchen today. Today we're going to be fermenting whole pickles. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm trying something that I've never tried before. When we talk about preserving food, we're talking about, canning, dehydrating, freeze drying, freezing, and fermenting. And we have fermented a couple of drink type things before. Dan has made kombucha before. And last year we made some hard apple cider, which is a fermentation process. So I thought, I want to try fermenting something else. And so we have a bumper crop now coming of cucumbers. And so I'm going to try fermenting some whole pickles. One of the reasons that fermenting pickles is better than canning pickles is that the fermentation process contains it develops a lot of probiotics that are really good for your immune system and for your gut health. So that's one of the reasons I want to try fermenting. If you are new to the channel, Dan and I are trying to become as self-sufficient as possible before we retire, and we're on about 8 acres, and so that seems like it's possible. So we're doing gardening. We're going to be building a 4 seasons passive solar greenhouse. If that sort of thing interests you, go ahead and consider hitting that subscribe button. We'd love to have you here with us. Now let's get to this. When you are selecting your pickles, you need to use pickling type cucumbers. And the reason is because they will be a crisper cucumber for pickling. And there's a couple of ways that we're going to promote crispness in our pickles, and I'll share that in a bit. But you need pickles or cucumbers that are, up to 5 inches or so long. We are going to be making a 1/2 gallon jar and probably a quart jar. I'm not exactly sure how many pickles are going to fill up the jars, but the recipe is going to be for a 1/2 gallon jar. The one that I'm speaking will be for a 1/2 gallon jar. You need to scrub your cucumbers well, of course, and then you need to cut off the blossom end of the cucumber. The blossom end of the cucumber is different than the vine end where you picked it, so this would be the blossom end. But sometimes it's hard to tell after you've picked it which is which. It doesn't matter as far as that, because you can just cut off both ends and then you can be sure that you've got the blossom end cut off. The reason why you want to do that is the blossom end contains an enzyme that can break down your pickle and make it not as crisp. You're going to need about 2.5 pounds of cucumbers to fill a 1/2 gallon jar. The next step after you cut off the blossom end is to soak them in ice water. Soaking in ice water helps the crispness. Some people will soak these for 2 or 3 hours. Some people only soak them 30 minutes. I've been soaking mine for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And I also added something else to the water that I want to talk to you about. This is calcium chloride. This is a natural food additive that does not expire, and this jar will literally last my lifetime. But if you take a look inside, you basically see these little white balls of all natural calcium chloride. If you've ever used something like Ball's Pickle Crisp or Mrs. Wage's Pickle Crisper, you'll see that it looks exactly the same because it is also just calcium chloride. But for that little jar, you're gonna spend, I don't know, $6. And if you go online, you can find all natural, food safe calcium chloride for a fraction of the cost of one of those Ball Pickle Crisp jars. This huge jar right here costs, I believe, $12 or $13 online. So, little tip for you. But I added about half a teaspoon to my water because calcium chloride also helps, of course, then with the crispness of the pickle. So I did add some to the water. I'm also going to add a titch to each jar. As your cucumbers are soaking in the ice water, you can collect everything else that you need. You're going to need some spices and you're going to need some whole garlic cloves. Whole garlic cloves you're going to need about 10 to 12 per half gallon. More if you like them more garlicky after you make them the first time. You might want to adjust the spices, and you certainly can do that. You could also add things like chilies or chili flakes, things like that that will make it spicier, but we are not going to be adding that today. We're just doing the basic recipe. Since this is the first time I'm fermenting pickles, we're just going to stick with the basics. You're going to need whole mustard seeds, dill seeds, celery seeds, whole allspice, fennel seed, and also peppercorn for the spices for inside the jar, along with your garlic cloves. Now let's make our brine with just fine canning salt or fine sea salt or fine Himalayan salt, not regular salt. We don't want any iodine in here. It can change the color of your pickles. And when you're making the brine, you want to have filtered or distilled water on hand to make that brine with. We don't want anything, especially if you're in town and you have chlorine in your water, that can affect the fermentation process. So we don't want anything affecting our process here. 5 cups of water, and then you need about like 5 to 7 grams by weight of salt per cup of water. And I measure that out, and it's just a little less than a teaspoon is going to give you about 6 grams, and so if you just eyeball a little bit less than a teaspoon, that would be fine. The reason why you want to be a little bit precise when you're doing the salt to water ratio is if you have too little salt, it's not going to kill bad bacteria. Remember, this isn't going to go through a canning process where heat would kill bad bacteria. So you want to kill the bad bacteria, but if you have too much salt, you're going to kill all the bacteria, including the good bacteria, and you're not going to get a fermentation process going at all. So make sure that you're at like 5 to 7 grams of salt per cup of water. If you see, my water here is 10 cups because I'm doubling the batch, but you will use 5 cups. And it's about, if you can see, about that much. And we're just going to stir this until it's dissolved. That's one of the reasons you want to use a fine salt. You're not going to be heating this up. Heat can kill the good probiotics that you are trying to develop in your ferment for your immune and your gut health. So you don't want to can these with heat. All right, that looks pretty good. Now let's prep our jar. Let's start packing this thing. You want to use clean, freshly clean, sterilized jars. for this. You don't want anything bad in there. We're going to add all of our whole spices to the bottom of the jar. So we've got a teaspoon of mustard seed, a teaspoon of fennel, teaspoon of peppercorns, and you can add a little more peppercorn if you want, teaspoon of celery seed, teaspoon of allspice, a teaspoon of dill seed, and you can add fresh dill in addition to this if you like. So that all goes in the bottom of the jar. And then to the bottom of this jar, I'm also going to add a half teaspoon of our calcium chloride, or pickle crisp, whatever you have. You can add other things too, like you could add onions, you could add, like I said, the hot chili, something like that to this jar as well. So now to this jar, we're going to start packing in our cucumbers. We're going to tightly pack a layer of cucumbers standing on their end, and then we're going to add some garlic cloves and a bay leaf. The enzyme that's in the blossom end of the cucumber that can make the pickle soft, that enzyme can be neutralized with a tannin. So something like a grape leaf or a bay leaf can neutralize that. If you cut off the blossom end, it's not such a big deal, but just to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and add a bay leaf to each layer. And we're just going to tilt the jar so we can make sure we get on our end and we're packed tightly. Kind of got a layer going on in there now. So now I'm going to add about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 garlic cloves and 1 bay leaf. Then we're going to finish packing. Okay, that's packed pretty tightly. I'm going to add some more garlic. A lot of people feel like more is better when it comes to adding garlic. We're going to put another, and that was a small one, so I'm going to do like 2 more bay leaves or so. So now we're going to pour our brine over, and then we're going to weight it down, and I'll show you how to start the fermentation process. One thing you might notice is when it's fermenting, it might bubble up and actually bubble over. So make sure you put a little cookie sheet or some kind of little pan underneath it just in case you get some overflow. But what I'm going to do is take this fermentation weight. This is a glass fermentation weight for a wide mouth jar. And this is just going to hold everything down in that water. We're just going to press and make sure everything is down in that water. If you don't have a weight to hold all of this down, whatever is not underwater will get moldy, and we don't want that. Now, if you don't have a glass fermentation weight, you can take a small Ziploc bag and put some water in it, seal it up real good, and use that as a weight to keep everything under. That will work just fine as well. The next step is you want to let this breathe while it's fermenting so it can off gas, but you don't want anything to get in there like a gnat or anything like that. So you want to either take a piece of cloth like a muslin or a cotton, something with a little bit tighter weave but breathable, and place that over the top, maybe secure it with rubber band, and that will work. Or you can use a fermentation type lid, which is what I'm going to do. I purchased these wide mouth fermentation lids. They have a seal around here. They have like a rubber gasket here. And what this does is it has a little plastic piece with it that goes down in this gasket, and that plastic piece has holes in it. So this goes down in here like this. And then you put water up into a certain level, which I'll show you. Then it has a little cap that goes down on there. What that does is it makes a water seal. And that water seal is going to allow, the cap has holes in it as well, and that water seal is going to allow gases to escape, and it will bubble, and you'll be able to see it bubble. So that's how we're going to do this. And then after I get that in there, there's a cap with little tiny holes that won't let a gnat or anything in. We just put that cap on top. Want to add a little water to the outer chamber of that, so that when we put this in, the holes are under the water, and then it will bubble and create that seal. And you might want to check this if you're using this every so often when you're fermenting. You might need to add a little bit of water to it. I'm going to put just a little more. Okay, and then we're going to add the cap to the top. Now this is ready to go into a cool, dark location. I've read that the perfect temperature for fermenting foods is about 60 to 65 degrees. My kitchen, we keep it at a 70-degree mark, and I am going to keep this here in like a closet. And then I'm going to check it after 2 days. After 2 days, you should see some bubbling. It's probably going to be starting to get cloudy, and that's okay. Just let it go. Just give it a quick visual check, make sure everything's okay. The bubbling means that the fermentation process is going. So we'll be happy to see that. And then after 3 to 5 days, the color will be starting to change if it hasn't started to change already. These pickles will end up being more of an olive type green than this bright green that you see here right now. If your room is hotter than 65 degrees, the fermentation process won't take as long, so make sure you keep an eye on it. And there's nothing wrong with opening up this jar and taking one of the pickles out and sampling it to see if it's the flavor that you like. But after about 3 to 5 days, I'm going to take this lid off. There'll be what's called like a half sour. It's like a half sour pickle. I'm going to take the lid off, and what I'll probably do is loosely put a lid on and stick it in the refrigerator. The refrigerator, if you put it in the refrigerator, it will help stop the fermentation process where you like it. You can let it sit maybe 2-3 weeks in the refrigerator, and it'll continue to pickle in there and be more of a stronger pickle flavor. And we're going to check back in on this probably next weekend. I'll let you know how the pickles are doing, and you can see what they look like after a week, and we'll taste one for you, and hopefully we'll be doing well. So if learning how to be more self-sufficient is a topic that interests you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment below. Have you ever fermented pickles? What have you fermented? Have you made sauerkraut or anything like that? Let us know down below, and we hope you're having a great day. We'll see you next time.